From the headquarters of Telesur English in Quito, Ecuador, this is From the South. I am Doris Polo. The 31st Intersessional Meeting of CARICOM Heads of Government has ended in Barbados with a resolution to improve integration and overcome disparities among the 15 member states. The two-day conference saw leaders discuss their response to the coronavirus outbreak, the elimination of taxes for transport and trade, as well as propose fixed roaming rates for the region. They also deliberated on a potential Caribbean-African forum. CARICOM Chair Mia Motley expressed that evening out the inequalities between the poorer and richer members would be a pillar of true integration.
One of the problems that has bedeviled the community for some time has been the issue of the CARICOM Development Fund. And we recognize, as I've said over and over, that in any single market and single economy, there are winners and there are losers. And it is to that extent that Chapter 7 of the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas speaks to the issue of there being need for a fund to be able to assist disadvantaged countries, disadvantaged sectors, disadvantaged regions. Member states have committed to capitalizing this fund. But this will never be enough to do what needs to be done, particularly with all of the challenges that the region faces at this point in time. Yesterday I outlined a number of them, and we keep seeing new challenges as we did with the COVID-19 virus. And to that extent, therefore, we feel strongly that we need to revisit the structure of the CARICOM Development Fund and to enable it to be able to raise additional funds, whether from individuals, companies, institutions, regional countries, and extra-regional countries. So my friends, I hope that we will appreciate that this policy decision taken by heads of government will make that significant difference, and it will come back to us in the near future. We've agreed that to have 2 meetings a year only is not going to advance the work of the community. And perhaps that is one of the most significant results of this meeting, that we have accepted that we will try to meet at least once a month, even if we do the intervening meetings by means of the technology that connects us. Last year, we were able to use the technology in order to bring heads of government together on a number of key issues. It worked extremely well for us, and we believe that this can now be a part of our normal business.
The Barbados Prime Minister and CARICOM Chair Mia Motley. Now, Dominica's Prime Minister Roosevelt Skerrit has signed 2 regional agreements on the sidelines of the CARICOM meeting. These are the Protocol on Public Procurement for the Caribbean Community, which gives individuals and firms the opportunity to bid for public sector contracts in the CARICOM single market and economy, also participating in the agreement on the return or sharing of recovered assets intended to strengthen regional cooperation in this area. British Virgin Islands Premier Andrew Fahey also signed 2 education-related agreements. In a tweet, Cuba's foreign minister thanked CARICOM heads for rejecting the strengthening of the U.S. blockade against the country and the application of the Helms-Burton Act, as well as for their deep appreciation for Cuba's medical cooperation that for years has contributed to the well-being of its peoples. We'll take a short break now. Join us again in just a tick.
A review of the world news that investigates, incites analysis, and induces criticism, because every event has a context.
Pusimos el punto en ahí.
Dot in the eye. Saturdays, only on Telesur.
Discover the cultural diversity that defines a continent. The place where art and tradition are part of the same nucleus. Artistic expressions, values, passion, and more. Real life. Fridays, only on Telesur.
Welcome back. Protests in the Dominican Republic continued on Tuesday, and this time they were met with tear gas outside the offices of the Electoral Authority. Our correspondent Daisy Toussaint has the latest.
There
has been tension in the Dominican Republic since the suspension of municipal elections on Sunday, February 16th, which was followed by 2 deaths and at least 6 injuries. Demonstrations have been held daily in front of the headquarters of the Central Electoral Authority, in which people have demanded the resignation of the board of the institution. Then on Tuesday night, demonstrators began demanding the resignation of the national government, as protesters say that the government was complicit in the fraudulent elections. As those citizens were peacefully protesting, police launched tear gas at those who were standing outside of the offices of the Electoral Authority with placards. They had noisemakers, costumes, pots and pans, among other things. The protesters were yelling that these people must be removed from power, things like "down with the corrupt," and saying that they must step down now. That Central Electoral Board called new elections for the 15th of March. Meanwhile, the Marcha Verde movement said that there are no guarantees and that what happened with the elections this past Sunday is evidence of the broken institutions throughout the country. They also said that the Central Electoral Board is not to be regarded as reliable for carrying out this process, as they had alerted back in October regarding the primary elections.
That was our correspondent Daisy Toussaint. Now, striking police officers in the Brazilian city of Sobral have shot Democratic Labour Party Senator CID or Cid Gomes as he was trying to disperse the protest. It is not yet known how serious Gomez's injury is, but according to his staff, he was shot in the chest and is now being treated in a nearby hospital. Dozens of officers of Brazil's military police were demanding an increase in their salaries and set up a blockade in front of a local police battalion. Gomes was driving a tractor trying to disperse the protest when he was shot. Authorities are still investigating whether he was shot on purpose or hit by a stray bullet. Argentina's debt is unsustainable. That's what the International Monetary Fund has concluded after meeting government officials in Buenos Aires. President Alberto Fernandez celebrated the IMF announcement, which stated it wasn't economically or politically feasible for Argentina to pay back its loans. The IMF also supported President Fernandez's suggestion that his government first needs to focus on the social needs of Argentinians. The IMF will now begin a new debt negotiation with the government. This begs the question, what are the options for the Argentinian government as it seeks to renegotiate its debt? To talk about this, we are joined from Sri Lanka by Eric Toussaint of the Campaign Against Third World Debt, or CADTM. He's a leading expert on international debt who took part in the audit of Ecuador's debt under President Rafael Correa and has spent a lot of time working with radical economists in Argentina on alternatives to the IMF deal. Thanks for your time, Eric.
Hello, how are you?
I'm great. Now, the statement from the IMF seems to agree with the Argentinian government that the debt is unpayable and will have to be restructured. So what is likely to happen next?
I think we should be very cautious with this type of declaration from IMF, because they say the payment of the debt is unsustainable, but they will never accept to cut off a part of the debt from Argentina to the IMF. So they are asking the other creditors, the private creditors, to accept to reduce the debt, and I don't think they will accept. So my recommendation would be to the Argentinian government is to do what Rafael Correa did in 2007, 2008, just after being elected for the first time. He organized an audit commission of the debt to identify the illegal or illegitimate or odious part of the debt. I have been part of this audit commission, and after 14 months, we presented our conclusion, saying that a big part of the debt was illegal and illegitimate. So the government suspended the payment, and it was a big victory of the government and the Ecuadorian people in front of the private creditors. At the same time, Rafael Correa expels the representative of the World Bank in Ecuador, and he asked the IMF to move from the office of the Central Bank of Ecuador to rent for themselves another office, because he wanted to show that his country was not submitted to the dictaments of the IMF. So I would recommend to Argentina to suspend the payment to the creditor and to organize an audit with citizen participation.
But Eric, can you just remind our viewers what the massive $57 billion IMF loan was for, what the Macri government did with the money, and what impact it had on the majority of the Argentinian people?
Yes, of course, it's very important because, Mauricio Macri, this right-wing government who take the power through election in 2016, promised to the people to make better their lives. But in reality, it began paying back the vulture funds, using a lot of public money, and his receipt, that's to say, neoliberal receipt, was a complete failure. So in 2018, Mauricio Macri asked Donald Trump to put a pressure on the IMF to convince the IMF to give a credit of $57 billion to Mauricio Macri. It is the most important credit from the IMF in its history. And it was clear already in the summer 2018 when the IMF took this decision under the pressure of Donald Trump that the debt was unsustainable. How can Argentina pay back $57 billion to the IMF plus all the debt to the private creditors? It was impossible. But it was a gift, from a political gift, from Trump to Macri to intend to intervene in the election of Argentina of 2019 with the expectative that with this help, Macri would be re-elected by the people. But now you have a new government of Alberto Fernandez. So my recommendation is to say, as government of Argentina, to say, you know, we didn't sign this agreement with the IMF. It's Mauricio Macri who signed it. So we don't recognize this agreement because this agreement was contrary to the interest of the Argentinian nation and to the people of Argentina.
That raises a good point. Would you say that the IMF is sort of acting like a stalking horse for countries that are seeming to have or that have weak economies at a particular point in time to potentially interfere and exercise the imperialist interest of other nations? Exactly.
It's very clear.
Demonstrations calling on the government.
It's very clear that the history of the IMF with Argentina. At the beginning of the Juan Domingo Perón government in 1948, Juan Domingo Perón decided not to integrate the IMF. And he says to the Argentinian people, the IMF is an instrument of the US imperialism. The dictatorship of 1955 overthrew Juan Domingo Perón and decided to integrate the IMF. And after that, when we had a new dictatorship in 76 with the General Videla, the IMF decided to support totally this dictatorship. So the history of the relation between Argentina and the IMF is a very black story for the people of Argentina. And so it's very important from the point of view of the interest of the people of Argentina to refuse to be submitted another time to the IMF and the imperialism.
Now, Eric, we've seen big demonstrations calling on the government not to pay the IMF, and you have also recommended that they say we didn't actually strike this deal with you. So what is the option for Alberto Fernandez's administration? What would happen if he just said, no, we won't pay and went deliberately into default?
I think it's really possible.
We seem to have lost Eric. Eric, can you hear me?
Yeah. Yes. You hear me? So I remember you that December 2001, already the government of Argentina, under the President Rodriguez Sá, decided to suspend the payment of the debt. And it was a big success between 2001 and 2005. In this case, actually, the repayment of Argentina to the private creditor is for the amount of 30 billion in 2020. So Argentina need to suspend the payment. What is interesting is that the payment to the IMF will begin only in 2021. So Argentina can suspend the payment to the private creditor and saying, we are doing an audit of the debt. We will analyze what happened with the IMF. And in this condition, Argentina doesn't have to enter immediately in conflict with the IMF because there is no payment to do in this year, during this year 20. So it's a strategy of a debtor country to try to divide the different creditors and to confront the private one. And maybe the IMF will not directly intervene because it will not be immediately affected by the decision of the Argentina government. And meanwhile, the Argentina can organize the audit of the debt and raise more and accumulate arguments to justify suspension of payment to the IMF.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much for joining us, Eric. Unfortunately, we are out of time, but we do appreciate you joining us.
Okay, thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you. That was Eric Tusa of the Campaign Against Third World Debt, really giving us his expert opinion on what is taking place between Argentina and the IMF as it relates to restructuring the country's debt. And with that, we'll take a short break now. Stay with us. Two people have died from the coronavirus in Iran, a country that until Wednesday had reported no confirmed cases. The two elderly Iranians died in the city of Qom, south of Tehran, and were the first confirmed cases of the novel coronavirus in Iran, raising the number of countries with confirmed cases outside of China to 27. Meanwhile, Iran's deputy health minister said that the ministry had set up emergency units for the treatment of contagious diseases in Qom. In some tragic news, at least 11 people have been shot dead in the German city of Hanau near Frankfurt. According to local media, a gunman first attacked people at a shisha bar in the city center before carrying out a similar strike at a bar nearby. The incident also left 4 people seriously injured. Police say the 43-year-old suspect died by suicide and believe the incident was motivated by xenophobia. Staying in Europe, France's powerful CGT labor union said they will no longer take part in discussions about how to fund the government's pension reform. The French parliament is expected to debate and vote on President Emmanuel Macron's reform on the first week of March. Several unions have called for a general strike on February 20th. And as in previous strikes, public transport will likely be affected. Moving to Africa, hundreds of Zimbabweans protested in the capital, Harare, on Wednesday against deteriorating living conditions. Protesters marched across the main streets of Harare, calling on the government to find solutions to the rising cost of living. Due to high inflation rates, Zimbabwean citizens have been struggling to afford basic services. The situation has been worsened by droughts, which affected the country in the past 3 years. And that brings us to the end of this news brief. You can find these and many other stories on our website at telesurenglish.net. And join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. For Telesur English, I'm Doris Polo. Thank you for watching.
The Pakistani journalist Tariq Ali examines the mass media influence promoted by imperialism. Get access to the analysis of the socio-economic and political life of the whole South America on our screen and platform in English. A critical place committed to the truth to determine the major events that transform the world today. Mondays, only on Telesur.
Discover the cultural diversity that defines a continent. The place where art and tradition are part of the same nucleus. Artistic expressions, values, and more. Real life. Fridays, only on Telesur. The life is full of moments. Moments of fight. Moments of hope. Moments that transcend. Moments that you can live in. Telesur documentaries. Sundays, only on Telesur. Innovation, science, the technological breakthrough and its influence in society.
Viajeros del saber, el futuro está aquí.
Atomen. Monday, only on Telesur.
Una travesía para descubrirnos. Buscamos conexiones perdidas.
No nos queda otra que luchar, porque no tenemos nada que perder.
Realmente es por todos.
Recorremos el mundo con Reportajes Telesur.